On-the-minute work is one of the most valuable tools for weightlifters. It's great for improving your technique, getting more consistent with heavy weights, and even setting PRs, but it's not a perfect method. In fact, there's two things about this that I really don't like, which I'll get into later at the video. Plus, at the end, I'll give you 3 sample 4-week on-the-minute training progressions for you to use in your own training. So what is on-the-minute work? Well, on-the-minute work is a method of training that I use for the Olympic lifts, in which I'll set a running clock, and at the beginning of every minute, I'll take 1 rep of either the snatch or the clean and jerk, and then rest the remainder of that minute. This can be a great way to structure your higher volume technique days, or it can be the foundation of your training for your entire week, depending on your goals. The biggest reason that on-the-minute work is such a great way to improve your technique is that it allows you to get higher quality technique work in due to the fatigue to feedback ratio. In typical higher volume work, it's normal to see sets of 2, sets of 3 in the Olympic lifts, and while this is not necessarily a bad approach to higher volume training, it could be better. The main problem with this approach is that the technique for the second rep and third rep is most likely always going to be worse because of the fatigue after the first one. Now, this is not always the case, which is one of my 2 gripes with on-the-minute work, but I'm going to dive into why a little bit later. Along with the fatigue being higher after the first rep, there is one positive aspect to this, which is that the feedback from that lift, balance, the proper positions, how strong your legs feel for that day. However, because of the increased fatigue, the chances that we'll be able to make a positive technique change based on that feedback is not very likely. So that's the fatigue to feedback ratio. The key is to find the right amount of time where the fatigue is low, but the feedback is still relatively high. And that sweet spot seems to be taking 1 lift about every minute. By taking 1 lift every minute, we can effectively get higher quality technique work in because of the less fatigue, and we can do it at heavier weights because we're not forced to hang onto the bar the entire time. And if we're operating under the assumption that increased technique and higher training volume is what's going to lead to long-term results, then on-the-minute work is a clear winner compared to traditional volume work. Have you ever missed a lift or 2 or 3 because you were too in your head? Multiple cues bouncing around in your brain, so you can't really figure out which one to work on. You try to do all of them, but successfully do none of them. This is just one more thing that on-the-minute work can help with. So for my anxious, overthinking lifters, you need to give this a try. By setting the clock and performing 1 lift every minute, it makes it much easier to get into the groove. And very simply, it's hard to overthink if you don't have time to overthink. So even if you consider yourself a pro-overthinker, on-the-minute work can still be your best friend. Have you ever shown up to a competition, looked at the entry list, and found out that you're the first lifter, or even worse, the last lifter, and that you'd be following yourself for every lift? Or maybe you've shown up at the gym 40 minutes before they close, and you're gonna have to make a decision between cardio and getting your lifting in. On-the-minute work can help in these situations as well, because along with improving the quality of your technique work and getting out of your head, it can also be an effective tool for improving your conditioning. Now, I know that as a weightlifting coach, if I put cardio on your weightlifting program, that it will most certainly be getting skipped. So on-the-minute work can be a great middle ground, because the fact is, if you don't have at least decent conditioning and you show up to a competition where you're going to be following yourself, you'll be sucking wind, especially after those heavy clean and jerk attempts. And for those of you who are more advanced, trying to qualify for bigger meets, win medals, or even make an international team, are you really going to let your conditioning be the determining factor between whether you achieve those goals or not? Now, I'm not saying that on-the-minute work is a good substitute for cardio, but for a weightlifter, it can definitely get you out of breath, and despite your aesthetic goals to look like Lasha or Krastev, it can and will make you a better weightlifter. So when is on-the-minute work not a tool that you should use? While it can be great for improving most of your technique, there is one technique that on-the-minute work is not as effective as triples and doubles are, and that is speed under the bar. If a lifter struggles to get under snatches, cleans, or jerks quickly, then doing multiple reps back to back will fatigue the lifter so that they cannot rely on their pull or pressing strength, and instead must figure out a way to get under the bar faster. This is one of the few cases where higher fatigue can actually improve your technique. So if this is something that you struggle with, then on-the-minute work may not be the best tool for you in this instance. However, this does not negate all of the other positive aspects of on-the-minute work, so keep that in mind when you're deciding whether to incorporate it in your training or not. Whenever I make videos about on-the-minute work, I always inevitably get asked, is this a good tool for improving your strength lifts as well? And the answer to that is kind of. In the beginning of this video, I spoke about the fatigue to feedback ratio, and in my opinion, this is the biggest benefit of on-the-minute work. The problem is that strength exercises create a lot more fatigue than the Olympic lifts do, which means that it takes a lot longer to recover from that lift before you can go for the next one. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't benefit from on-the-minute work, but you'll likely either need to take the weight down by about 10% or increase the time to 90 seconds, maybe even 2 minutes instead of every minute, which negates most of the other positive benefits. So if you want to do this, try it out and let me know in the comments comments if it works for you. Now that we've covered the details, let's get into the application. So here are 3 sample 4-week on-the-minute training progressions for you to use that can help you improve your technique, get consistent with heavy weights, and even set PRs. First is the technique progression. Now, this progression is the first one that I'll give to somebody if they've never done on-the-minute work. So if you're new to this, start here. These can be all done in one day as your high volume technique day, or it can be split up across the week, doing snatches on day 1, split jerks on day 2, and cleans on day 3, with a day of rest in between. So if you respond really well to low frequency, or you want to fit other things into your training, this is a good training split for you to try. On week 1, we'll do 15 minutes at 70% of your 1 rep max. Remember that we're only doing 1 rep every minute. On week 2, we'll do 12 minutes at 75%. Week 3, we'll do 8 minutes at 80%. And week 4, we'll do 5 minutes at 85%. Now, if you're new to this style of training, you may feel pretty rough on week 1, but as the minutes drop and your conditioning improves from week to week, you'll likely start getting in the groove a lot faster each week. Pro tip, for those of you guys with a very strong clean and jerk, you can turn that portion into 1 minute of rest in between lifts rather than every minute, because the clean and jerk takes about twice as long as a snatch does, and you need that extra time to recover because the weight is a lot heavier and it's harder to recover. So ease into it with that first, and then if you can progress up to being able to do them every minute, give that a try. The second progression is my personal favorite, and that is the heavy consistency progression. I use this all the time in my 3 and 5 day OlyStrong weightlifting program because it's so effective. In this progression, we'll take a few heavy singles after the on-the-minute work, which is a great way to get more practice in with heavier percentages without actually also building up to a max after those. So if you struggle with consistency in the 80 to 95% range, this is a great progression for you. On week 1, we'll do 12 minutes at 70%, then follow that up with 2 sets of 1 at 75% and 2 sets of 1 at 80%. Not too bad for week 1. On week 2, we'll do 10 minutes at 75%, followed by 2 sets of 1 at 80% and 2 sets of 1 at 85%. On week 3, we'll do 8 minutes at 80%, followed by 2 sets of 1 at 85% and 2 sets of 1 at 90%. And on week 4, we'll do 4 minutes at 85%, followed by 2 sets of 1 at 90% and 2 sets of 1 at 95%. Now, there's 2 ways that you can approach these heavy singles. You can continue to do them on the minute, or you can take a minute off as you adjust your weights and then try to maintain a consistent rest time without necessarily doing them on the minute, maybe an extra 30 to 60 seconds between reps. It's important to keep that rest time consistent so that you don't lose your edge or get out of the groove of your lifts. The last progression I use somewhat rarely, but it works really well for those of you guys who spread this on-the-minute work across the week instead of all in one day, and that is the PR cycle. Just like with the heavy consistency cycle, we're going to take some heavy singles after the on-the-minute work, but instead of trying to get good in the 80 to 95% range, we're going to be working up to a heavy single for the day, aiming to hit a PR on week 4. On week 1, we'll do 10 minutes at 70%, then follow that up with 4 singles building up to a heavy top set for that week. On week 2, we'll do 8 minutes at 75%, then again 4 singles building up to a heavy top set for that week, aiming for more than we did the week before. On week 3 is 6 minutes at 80%, followed by another 4 singles building up to a heavy top weight, aiming for 5 to 10 pounds more than you did on the previous week. And week 4 is 4 minutes at 85%, followed by another 4 singles, but this time building up to a max or a PR on the last one. Now, the key to choosing these top sets is to work backwards from your max. So here is a sample progression for somebody who has a PR of 220 and wants to hit 225 for the first time. The first week, I'd hit 155 for my 70% work, and then after that, I'll build up with the 4 singles at 165, 175, 185, and 195. On week 2, we'd hit 165 for our on-the-minute work, as that is our 75%, and then we'll take our 4 singles at 175, 185, 195, and 205. On week 3, I'd hit 175 for our on-the-minute work, and then our 4 singles will be at 185, 195, 205, and 215. And finally, for week 4, we'll take 185 for our on-the-minute work, and then after that, we'll take 195, 205, 215, and then jump to 225 to hit that 5-pound PR. The key to this is knowing what your goal weight is for that last week's top set so that you don't ever accidentally tie your PR, which would be useless, or overshoot your PR and lead to a bunch of misses. So there are your 3 sample on-the-minute training progressions. Give those a try. Let me know what you think. And if you found this video helpful, then please make sure to subscribe to the channel. Check out my coaching and programs linked in the description below. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye.